They called it the Doctor Killer, a machine blamed for snapping its own tail and ruining the lives of well-heeled amateurs. Pilots learned to fear the V-tail Bonanza, certain that every flight was a gamble. But when you dig into the crash files, a pattern emerges. Most victims lacked advanced training, not luck. Today's data tells the real story, one that upends everything you think you know about safety, survival, and what it truly means to fly. So, if you trust reputation over reality, you're already in the wrong cockpit. In the summer of 1950, a Bonanza came apart in clear air over Kansas. The Civil Aeronautics Board filed the report, and the stack of reports would only grow. Witnesses on the ground described a V-tail Bonanza cruising near its top speed, hitting turbulence or a sudden control input. They saw the tail break away from the fuselage, the aircraft pitch violently, and fragments rain down across fields. Headlines called it the fork-tailed devil. Panic spread through hangars and country clubs. The public blamed the V-tail silhouette, a shape unlike anything else in the sky. Inside those crash files, a pattern took shape. Early Bonanzas, especially the C-35 and later models, carried a longer tail cord. Instead of reinforcing the new leading edge, Beechcraft left a 16-inch overhang at the root, unsupported by the main spar. In high-speed flight, especially with abrupt rudder-vator deflection or a sudden updraft, the leading edge could twist, the root could fold, the tail could separate, and the aircraft would lose control. Civil Aeronautics Board investigators documented torsion loading that exceeded what the design could handle, even when pilots stayed within the published speed limits. Between 1947 and the late 1980s, government records show more than 130 in-flight breakups in V-tail Bonanzas. Most involved turbulence, thunderstorms, or a descent that got away from the pilot. The official reports are clinical. Investigators wrote that the tailplane separated inboard at the root, a pitch excursion followed, and then wing failure. The press was less forgiving. Reporters and editors pointed to wealthy owners, doctors, lawyers, and businessmen who bought speed but skipped the training. From that stack of crash reports and from a real design flaw that demanded a fix, the myth of the Doctor Killer was born. In the logbooks of the 1950s, a pattern emerges. New Bonanza owners with barely 100 hours in their log, sometimes less. The typical buyer was a successful professional, a doctor, a lawyer, a man who could afford the best airplane on the ramp. He wanted speed, comfort, and the prestige of a machine that looked like nothing else in the sky. But many of these men were stepping up from Cubs and Champs, trading 80 horsepower for 205, fixed gear for retractable, simple controls for the complexity of the V-tail rudder-vator system. Flight schools, eager to please, signed off high-performance endorsements after a few hours of airwork and across country. The insurance companies wrote policies without demanding real proficiency. Transition training, as we know it today, barely existed. A flight instructor from the era recalled that you would get a new owner in the left seat, show him the gear lever, the pitch trim, run through a couple of stalls, and that was it. The rest he learned at 12,000 feet, alone. The Bonanza's speed was seductive. In smooth air, it cruised faster than most twin-engine planes. But in turbulence, or with a heavy hand on the controls, the margins shrank. A sudden updraft, an abrupt pull, and the tail could be loaded past its limits. Most of the early breakups did not happen because the airplane was weak. They happened because the pilot was unprepared for what he was flying. The myth of the Doctor Killer grew, not just from the metal in the fields, but from the gap between what the airplane could do and what its owners had been taught to handle. This was not a machine that forgave carelessness. The Bonanza demanded skill. The accidents forced a reckoning, not just in the factory, but in the way pilots would be trained from that point forward. The answer came in the form of a bracket, cold machined steel, engineered to do what no amount of wishful thinking could: force the laws of physics to respect the V-tail. Beechcraft called it the cuff. It was not a patch or a band-aid. It was a structural solution, born from test rigs and broken airframes, designed to anchor the forward inboard corner of the stabilizer directly to the fuselage. Before the cuff, The C-35 and later Bonanzas carried a 16-inch extension at the root of the tail, unsupported by the main spar. In flight, especially at high speeds or in turbulence, that overhang twisted under load. The leading edge flexed, the root folded, and the tail separated. The cuff changed the entire load path. Two steel brackets, one on each side, reached forward from the tail's leading edge and bolted to the strongest part of the fuselage. Now, when the stabilizer faced torsion or bending, the force traveled not through a thin skin or a single rib, but directly into the backbone of the airplane. Engineers ran ground tests, then flight tests, pushing the modified tail to the edge of the envelope. The difference was measurable. Before the cuff, the tail would start to diverge at loads well below the design limit. With the cuff installed, the structure absorbed stress without folding. The leading edge stayed rigid, even under abrupt control inputs or turbulence that would have doomed the earlier planes. The FAA made the cuff mandatory through an airworthiness directive. Every C-35 and later V-tail Bonanza flying today carries this reinforcement. It is not just a fix, it is a statement of engineering pride. The machine now met, and in many cases exceeded, the structural standards demanded by the regulators. The data tells the story. After the cuff, in-flight tail failures in V-tail Bonanzas became as rare as in any straight-tail rival. The myth of the weak tail ended not with a headline, but with a blueprint and a pair of steel brackets quietly doing their work at 200 miles per hour. A&P mechanics across the country opened up V-tail Bonanzas and got to work. The Airworthiness Directive was not a suggestion, it was a mandate. The cuff kit arrived from Beechcraft in a plain cardboard box, 2 steel brackets, a handful of bolts, and a set of instructions that left nothing to chance. Each bracket had to be torqued to spec, each hole drilled in the right place, each edge treated for corrosion. Logbooks from the late 1980s and early 1990s fill up with the same entry, AD complied with, cuff installed. Mechanics remember the job as a rite of passage. One A&P mechanic, who has been signing off Bonanzas since the Reagan years, puts it simply. You'd pull the tail fairing, check the old rivets for cracks, and if the brackets were not there, you did not let it fly. Not on my watch. Compliance swept through the fleet. By the mid-1990s, nearly every airworthy C-35 and later V-tail in the United States carried the cuff. The FAA tracked compliance through mandatory inspections, and insurance companies refused to cover any Bonanza without the fix. The numbers tell the story. After the cuff, in-flight tail. Failures in V-tail Bonanzas dropped to levels indistinguishable from their straight-tail siblings. Accident reports that once began with empennage separated in flight now read like any other high-performance single. Loss of control, fuel exhaustion, pilot disorientation. The myth of the weak tail faded from the maintenance hangar to the insurance office. Maintenance logs show a new normal. Annual inspections focus on tail rigging, bracket security, and control surface balance. The most common squawks are minor, magnesium corrosion on a ruddervator, a sticky trim tab. The catastrophic failures are gone. A&P mechanics, who once worried about flutter and folding, now worry about the same things they do on any fast retractable single: gear rigging, engine health, and the occasional bird strike. The Bonanza is, by every practical measure, as structurally sound as any airplane in its class. The fix is not a rumor, it is a reality, stamped in steel and signed in ink, fleet-wide. On paper, the Cirrus parachute system, called CAPS, looks like the ultimate safety net. Pull the red handle and a rocket fires, launching a Kevlar line skyward. The entire airframe floats down under a round white canopy. Cirrus touts the numbers. Over 100 lives saved since the first SR-20 entered service in 1999. The Cirrus Owners and Pilots Association, COPA, safety reports document 126 CAPS deployments through 2025, with 107 classified as saves, meaning all occupants survived. The system works best above 500 feet above ground level and below 133 knots. Within that window, deployment is straightforward. Engine failure over rough terrain, pilot incapacitation, spatial disorientation — these are the classic CAPS scenarios. The statistics show that when the parachute is pulled in time and within the design envelope, survival is almost guaranteed. But the numbers also reveal boundaries. Of the 126 deployments, 19 ended with fatalities or serious injuries. In most of those, the aircraft was either too low or too fast for the parachute to slow the descent. CAPS cannot be deployed on final approach, just after takeoff, or during a high-speed loss of control. The system requires the pilot to recognize trouble early, commit to the pull, and hope the airspeed and altitude are on their side. The official Cirrus Pilot's Operating Handbook spells it out. The minimum recommended altitude for straight and level deployment is 600 feet above ground level. Below that, the outcome is uncertain. The limits are real. Every year, COPA compiles data on deployments by phase of flight, survival rates, and contributing factors. The data shows a clear pattern. Successful CAPS activations cluster in the cruise and climb phases when there is time and space to react. The further from the runway, the safer the parachute. When pilots wait too long, hoping to recover or unsure if it is really time, the window closes fast. In the wrong scenario, the parachute is just another lever in the cockpit. The numbers are honest. CAPS is a powerful tool, but not a guarantee. Its record is built on decisive action and the right circumstances, not on magic. A parachute in the ceiling changes how a pilot thinks about risk. The red handle is not just a backup, it is a promise written into the psychology of every Cirrus cockpit. Human factor researchers call this the risk compensation effect. When a machine offers a reset button, decision thresholds shift. Pilots who once weighed every cloud and every mile of terrain now carry a silent assurance. If things go wrong, the system will save them. Insurance underwriters noticed the pattern. Early Cirrus buyers, many new to high-performance flying, often cited the Cirrus airframe parachute system, known as CAPS, as their reason for choosing the plane. Some even told brokers they would just pull the chute if trouble started. The data shows that with passive safety features, pilots sometimes accept conditions they might have avoided in an aircraft that demands active control. Surveys from the early 2020s revealed that a significant share of Cirrus pilots reported feeling more comfortable flying at night or in marginal weather, knowing the parachute was there. Accident reviews show a cluster of CAPS deployments in situations where traditional training would have called for a diversion or a go-around. The presence of a safety net changes the calculus, not always for the better. In scenarios where altitude or speed fall outside the CAPS envelope, hesitation or overconfidence can be fatal. The pilot delays the decision, hoping for recovery or a better option, only to find the window closing fast. Contrast this with the Bonanza. There is no parachute. The margin for error is defined by skill, not by a lever. Behavioral studies suggest that when pilots know there is no backup, they fly more conservatively. They avoid the edge of the envelope because the consequences are absolute. The machine demands respect, and in return, it rewards discipline. The question is not just which plane is safer, but which philosophy makes a safer pilot. The debate is no longer about steel or composite, but about the kind of choices we make when we know there is no second chance. In the world of aviation safety, numbers tell the truth that rumors cannot. When researchers normalize fatalities by flight hours, the story of the V-tail Bonanza shifts. According to the most recent NTSB and FAA data, after the cuff retrofit, the V-tail Bonanza fleet averages a fatal accident rate that rivals, and in some years even beats, the Cirrus SR series. For the period leading up to 2025, the Cirrus SR22 and SR20 combined report a fatal rate between 0.78 and 1.63 per 100,000 flight hours, depending on the year and the source. The V-tail Bonanza, after the mandatory cuff retrofit, consistently matches these figures, with some analyses showing lower rates among experienced pilots. phase of flight breakdowns reveal more. The majority of Cirrus fatalities happen on approach and landing, scenarios where the parachute cannot be deployed safely. CAPS, the Cirrus parachute system, succeeds most often in cruise or climb, but is ineffective at low altitude or at high speed. In contrast, the Bonanza's accident profile shows fewer structural failures and a higher proportion of survivable incidents, especially when flown by pilots with proper training. Fleet size matters, but so does exposure. The Cirrus fleet logs nearly 1 million hours per year worldwide, while the active V-tail Bonanza fleet is smaller and aging gracefully. Despite that, when the numbers are adjusted for hours flown, the V-tail's reputation as a doctor killer collapses under statistical scrutiny. The data now supports a different narrative. A well-maintained, properly flown Bonanza is at least as safe as its composite rival, and in some hands, safer. A Bonanza owner named Mark keeps a laminated checklist taped above his yoke. He's flown the same V-35B for 15 years, with more than 1,000 hours logged, every annual signed off by the same mechanic. One afternoon, crossing the Rockies, he hit mountain turbulence that snapped his shoulder harness against his chest. Airspeed bled off, the nose pitched up, and the altimeter spun. In that moment, there was no parachute handle to grab, just muscle memory and training. Mark eased off the back pressure, rolled wings level, and watched the airspeed recover. The tail never complained. After landing, he found a loose trim tab bolt during his walk-around, a reminder that even a bulletproof design relies on vigilance. His story isn't rare. NTSB records show Bonanza pilots walking away from upsets that would have ended differently in a plane that asks less of its owner. The difference is discipline. Every survivor carries a ritual: pre-flight the tail brackets, check ruddervator balance, run hands along the seams for corrosion. The Bonanza rewards those who respect its checklist. Mark's advice is simple: don't fly the legend, fly the airplane. In the end, the safest cockpit belongs to the pilot who treats every flight as a test and every landing as proof that skill, not marketing, brings you home. Today, accident data shows the Bonanza's fatality rate when flown by trained pilots is lower than the Cirrus, despite the Cirrus having a parachute. As automation grows and pilot skills atrophy, the real risk is not the machine, but complacency. In aviation, safety is not sold. It is earned in the left seat. The sky still rewards mastery. What kind of pilot do you want to be? Share your thoughts in the comments.